Before you all depart, I want to reintroduce Leslie back to the stage because this is the park and there's a lot going on at the park. So Leslie, come on out.
Thank you, dear. All right, thanks for that. So part two of this hour, we're going to talk about the sort of like the census data for broadband. Cisco Systems does this study every year. It's in the 5th year. They call it Visual Networking Index, or VNI. We're going to ask Murali Nemani, who is Senior Director of Video Solutions Marketing for Cisco's Service Provider Group, to come out now, and we will walk through the highlights of this really interesting study. Come on out, Murali. Good morning, good almost afternoon. So let's start with the study itself. How did it come to pass? And a little set up what the study is.
So, everybody, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So Cisco's Visual Networking Index is a study that we put together. This is the 5th year that we've published this study, and it's had a tremendous amount of traction globally, from state governments to national governments, in terms of helping not just service providers, but also the state governments plan for broadband adoption and also the growth of IP traffic. So a couple of points. One, the Visual Networking Index is really a measure of what we forecast, and we analyze data that is coming across from around the world. And much of this data is based on the basis of the number of subscribers that are growing, and we actually look at the traffic patterns that are happening on networks around the world. So
right.
we compare based on not just our forecast, but we actually see in the traffic in the networks that service providers are providing to us to help plan and make sense of it.
And a lot of that is video. Let's start looking at the major trends. If we could go to the first slide. So obviously, traffic is growing. Put it in context for us.
So if you look at the latest figures that we just published, this is it's consistent with the growth patterns that we've talked about. And one of the things that's really interesting is that just North America alone, the CAGR seems to continue to grow. We expect about a 3x growth between 2010 and 2015 in the overall IP traffic, right? And that's a consistent rate that is actually, it's not slowing down. So in that sense, North America will have a significant amount of growth in the overall IP traffic. But what's really interesting is the growth in the Asia-Pac markets, and that's another one. So Asia-Pac actually starts driving the overall market growth for IP traffic. And there's some very important trends here that are making these numbers come to life. One is the growth in the number of devices that we're seeing, the explosion of all these devices. We're now looking at something about 15 billion IP-connected devices that are going to be in the market by 2015.
15 billion with a B.
With a B, exactly. And these devices are your game consoles, your tablets, your PC Macs, and of course your connected TVs, right? So that explosion in devices itself is driving more consumption of content and of course of traffic. And then you're also seeing the growth in the broadband tiers and the speeds that are increasing on these different services.
Talking about devices, we can go to the second slide. I did this unscientific study. I actually see two gentlemen in the audience who participated in my Facebook study when I asked everyone, how many IP-connected devices do you have in your house right now? Because it can be all kinds of things beyond your PC. It can be your digital picture frame. Anyway, the average was 10, and my friends are all engineering kind of people, and the high was 33. But tell us what you're seeing in the report about people and their gadgets that need an internet connection.
So that growth in the number of these connected devices is actually changing the way that even the experience is handled, right? So when we look at this data and we say, well, if you have a 5 megabit connection and that connection is, increased to 100 megabits, what does that do to the overall, the speed, and not just from the way you view a content? So here, this slide really talks about what an HD movie would be if you delivered it, in a kind of an on-demand kind of a way to these different devices. How long would it take? And what you're seeing is that the 100 megabit kind of profiles is a really, instantaneous way to experience that content or that rich service. And one of the interesting things is here at NCTA, we're seeing some very interesting technology demos that are going to be great enablers of this. We're seeing the introduction of this, the DOCSIS footprint, and so when you think about the DOCSIS evolution of DOCSIS being able to support these kind of speeds, today, Leslie, we're talking about 100 megabits, and DOCSIS 3 being able to do that. But we're now seeing 1 gigabit plus in terms of its capabilities to take that. So from a cable operator and a cable industry, this is really good because it allows the cable industry to compete very effectively with fiber-based deployments that are happening from their competitors, or more importantly, be able to drive this broadband adoption with significant speeds.
Yeah, if you were to clear off every channel and take them all to a digital status and bond them all together, which the technology is not quite there to do it yet,
yes,
but coming, you would have about 5 gigabits per second to the consumer shared, but that's a lot of bandwidth.
That's a competitive advantage for the industry in terms of all the innovation that's happening on the internet, right? To be able to facilitate that. But more importantly, it's when you have all these different devices that are now extensions of that experience. So it's not so much about the old world of being able to, not so old, but the current world, let's say, of being able to watch television on your television in your living room. You have those 500 channels or what delivered to you, and those 500 channels, you're basically clicking through it. Now you're shifting to a world where everything is coming directly to you in what we call a unicast model, where content and services are delivered to you one-to-one.
Right.
And when it becomes one-to-one, not one-to-many, and it's highly personalized, you start seeing the need for a better, stronger broadband network to enable that.
And of course, a lot of what we're seeing in terms of what's moving over the internet is video. What's happening with the...
So this is a really interesting chart, and we've been tracking this for 5 years now. And what we've concluded is that the overall growth in the market for consumer internet traffic, if you break that down by application, video becomes the killer app, if you will, in terms of the growth and what people are doing on the internet. So, and it's very, Leslie, it's very natural to our way we behave. We tend to communicate visually. We tend to want to see each other or watch content and instead of reading a lot of text.
Right.
And so what we're seeing is that 61% of all of the video traffic, the consumer internet traffic, is going to be driven by video.
And what is it now? I'm looking at the blue line.
Yeah, so right now it's about 5, it's about 5 petabytes, which is, and this is like a 5x growth, what we're seeing. So if you map that from 2010 to 2015, the predominant application that is going to drive the investments we make in broadband is going to be video. And one of the interesting things is, of that 61%, 55% of that is going to be HD, 3D type applications.
It's a big video.
Right.
Yeah.
And because if you think about the way we watch content today, we watch it on our tablets or our PCs, and it's really standard definition content. It's content that's been brought down in terms of its, in terms of the resolution and the formats. What we're really talking about is a world where we can start delivering native HD capability across these devices and across those networks. And that requires a tremendous amount of traffic and support on the broadband networks.
Does it ever stop? Like, as Tony Horner says, does the corn grow to the sun? Does it just keep going, do you think?
So in one sense, the good news is everybody's rallying around this protocol called IP. And it's interesting because the cable industry is actually embracing that full force. And by embracing that, we're offering a vehicle for consumers to get access to content, to get access to their applications, all in an integrated manner. And I think that's this is why the growth continues, because people and the innovators on the internet and the web and the cable operators are using that as a consistent platform to drive services. So growth for the foreseeable future, is hard to understand in a different way.
Any closing remarks? We're almost out of time.
Yeah. So one, I thank you for having me, but I think the Visual Networking Index is a great way, and we've offered it as a tool to the various different industries and government planners to think about, and it actually ties with the previous topic, which is how do we drive broadband adoption, how do we drive innovation across these different investments that cable operators are making. And for the content community, it's an incredibly valuable way for you to distribute your content, but then do it in a way that delivers the high definition kind of experience consumers are used to.
All right, thank you, Murali. And also, let's thank Cisco, because they are providing all of the streaming for the park at live.thecableshow.com. We're going to go dark for an hour, and then I'll be back to talk to you about how the cable industry is bridging from today's set-top box technology to gateways to putting all of that stuff inside the television set without a set-top box. So, thank you,
Leslie.
Murali.
Thank you. Good.